And with that, I'm going to turn things over to our panel and to Richard Gallagher, who is moderating.
Thank you, Leah. I don't know if I'm on. Can you hear me? Yes. Well, it's such a pleasure to welcome everyone to this opening keynote session of the 2024 Charleston Conference. It's great to be back in this fabulous theatre, not intimidating at all. And we're in for a real treat this morning with two remarkable figures from our community taking the stage. Between them, they've seen it all, done it all, and then some. In terms of background, they each embody the two main groups that come together at this conference. Katina Strauch is first and foremost a librarian. She is also a Charlestonian. She moved here in 1975. And she joined the College of Charleston Library, which is just a short walk from here, in 1979. After an incredible career of service at the college, she retired from the Addleston Library, which is the main research library for this region, in 2016. Of course, we know her for her side gig. She created and runs this glorious Charleston Conference, now in its 45th year, I think. And so it'll hit its 50th anniversary. This is only of interest to me, probably. 1 year before Annual Review has its centenary, so it's a nice combination. Katina is also a publisher, notably of Against the Grain, which she launched in 1989. And what you may not know about her is that she and her husband are successful fiction writers. They've co-authored numerous books translated into multiple languages. So a true polymath. Richard Charkin is a powerhouse of publishing. Over the past 50 years, he has been an absolutely key figure in shaping both academic publishing and trade publishing. He's responsible for some of the boldest innovations in academic publishing, making use of technology to keep some of the most esteemed publishing houses and university presses relevant into the digital age. As if this wasn't enough, he's also enjoyed major success in the glamorous, sometimes merciless world of trade publishing, again, taking a lead in modernizing business practices, but also publishing some extremely high-profile books by some of the biggest names on the planet. What's fascinating is that despite the prominence of their contributions over many decades, working on these very adjacent topics, Katina and Richard only have met once before, and that was very briefly before the idea of this session came up. They did meet yesterday, they got on well. So today we're going to enjoy their shared insights and reflections. We have 45 minutes. There's 15 minutes set aside at the end for anyone who would like to ask a question or a comment. I'm not exactly sure how you do that, if there's microphones somewhere. It could be that maybe we'll take some questions through the course of the session so that everything's not crammed in at the end. So if you do have a comment or a question, I would ask you to state your name and your affiliation if you'd like to, and ask a brief question or comment to either one or preferably to both Katina and Richard. So let's get started then. I wonder if we could start with how you got into your careers. Can you identify a specific influence, a person or an event that helped to set you on the track that you took? And did your career progress in a smooth, planned way, or was there a lot of accident and serendipity along the way?
I am. Is this okay? Yeah. It sounds too loud. Excuse me. Both of my grandparents are Greek Orthodox Greek, and I know what I learned from them. So my father was a very strong influence on my life. He's not with us anymore, but he was a huge influence on me. He helped me find my profession. He helped me find everything. So,
Well, yeah. My career started very inauspiciously. I managed to persuade a leading British newspaper to pay for me to write an article about climate change in Utah. This was in 1971. They published it. It took me 3 months of travel and research. They published it and sent me a check for £10. Now, even in those days, £10 didn't get you very far. I queried it, and they said, well, if you could only join the National Union of Journalists, we'd pay you more. How do you do that? Or write another 5 or 6 articles like that, or go and work in some godforsaken small newspaper in somewhere or other for 2 or 3 years, or get a job in book publishing where the union is recruiting. I wrote off to 50 publishers, and remember, this is 1971, there's no email, had to write them, well, I didn't even have a typewriter, handwritten addresses. Also, incidentally, finding the addresses was not easy. I had to go to the library and take out a book and see what it said on the title verso. I was obviously rejected by, or ignored by most, and rejected by 2 of the 3 who interviewed me. The rejections came from Collins and from Hodder and Stoughton, and they were quite right. Fortunately for me, the third and final one, which was a family company called George G. Harrop, famous more for its French dictionary, but with a sort of view to publishing science, and I had a science degree, took me on at £1,200 a year. So that's how I got into the business. I would say it was more desperation to find any job than any great motivation to become a publisher. How about you?
well, you know, I'm sorry. I was lucky to get a job as a librarian at the College of Charleston, at the UNC Chapel Hill. A lot of people wanted jobs, and so I decided to get certified as a medical librarian. That took a while, so that meant I could get a job. So anyway, then I had to get a degree, so my husband was getting a degree in history, and I had to get a degree in library science. So I got a degree, and then we moved on to something else.
Well, when I got this job as a science editor, they assumed that I knew something about science. Now, one of the untruths about at least British education is just because you have a degree from a good university doesn't mean you know anything about the subject of the degree, which was certainly my case. So on day 1 of being the science editor at a book publishing house, someone from production came to see me, said, we are going to publish volume 1 of revision exercises in mathematics. How many shall we print? I said, I really don't know. How many should we print? And he said, no. You are the science editor. This is your decision. So I said, well, how, 10,000 perhaps? And he said, fine, we'll do that. And I suspect to this day, 9,995 are filling up some warehouses. But the thing about not knowing what your job is and what you're really meant to do is you're forced, faute de mieux, to find out. And particularly, you said about being a medical librarian, similarly, being a science person in an environment which was largely humanities, driven fiction and biography and children's books. no one else was interested in science. So really, we had to work it out. I had to work it out for myself. And it took me 2 years and lost the company. I cannot imagine how much money with all the mistakes I made, which, as I say, are lying in warehouses to this day, but gave me an understanding of the whole industry, including libraries, bookshops, and publishing itself, and translations, all those building blocks of understanding your job, which is incidentally very hard to do if you're joining the industry now in an environment of working from home, and we have to find some solution to that, in my view.
I got divorced and quit my medical. Well, I couldn't find a medical library job in Charleston, so I moved. I was lucky enough to get offered a job at a public library, and then I was lucky enough to get another job at an academic library, the College of Charleston, as head of head of acquisitions. I was the very first acquisitions librarian at the College of Charleston. So that was funny. I didn't know anything about buying books. Yeah. I was supposed to be figuring out how to buy books, and I was in charge of the whole department. So I had to learn about everything. I had to learn about Library of Congress. It wasn't fun.
Of course, it wasn't in any specific discipline. It was across the board.
It was for everything.
Quite a good training.
Yeah. Of course, from a publisher's point of view, having a librarian who doesn't know what they're doing is terrific. I took my next thing on this slippery ladder was to join a company called Pergamon Press. I joined it mainly because it was not in London, it was in Oxford, and I had children coming along, and I couldn't afford to live in London. Oxford was a bit cheaper in those days. And Pergamon Press was run, I think it could be described as a totalitarian regime, taking lots of, if Putin had been around, Robert Maxwell would have been his biggest fan. It was run by Robert Maxwell, who ended badly. But did you ever come across him?
I didn't. I did try to interview him. I was in England, and I went to Headington Hill Hall and tried to interview Maxwell, but instead I interviewed Brian Cox, who was a great guy and showed me everything. So, but I'm sorry I never was able to meet Maxwell. I might have been lucky, but he did die in 1971. I can't remember. During a Charleston Conference.
Oh, right.
He tried to give us, heads up.
Well, for those who don't know, this guy was a Czech refugee.
A bouncing Czech.
A bouncing Czech, indeed. And boy, did they bounce. And so did he. He was up and down. He arrived in Britain, and in my view, and I think possibly in other people's views as well, he sort of invented the business infrastructure of scientific publishing, almost as we know it today. It's gone through many transformations and changes, but the very idea that journal publishing could be profitable and could grow was news to most British and American publishers at the time. Is that a fair comment?
Yes, I think so. I agree. He was amazing. I'm really sorry I never was able to even ask him one question. But he was an amazing man.
At least from my viewpoint, there was something of a Cold War between the publishers and the librarians for quite an extended period. Is that a fair description, and can the cause of that be laid at the door of Robert Maxwell, or is that an unfair characterization of his legacy?
I wouldn't say that, in my opinion, what do y'all think? What does the audience think? I think that, you know, it was okay. We were okay.
Well, one of the stories that's in your book, Richard, is how Maxwell ran the company on a daily basis. Can you tell us that little anecdote about going through the mail?
Okay, there I was, 24 years old, I think, or so, turning up at Headington Hill Hall, which is just outside Oxford, and realizing that this was no longer a small family business, this was a real business. The publishers, I was one of them, and salespeople and various other people were summoned every morning, 8 o'clock, to the post room, which was a large room, and Maxwell would open every single letter himself, would read it, and hand it out for action to one or other of us round the table. We tried to keep out of the way because we really didn't want to get this, but still. And the letters could be anything. They could be a double glazing sales pitch, and he'd hand it to someone and say, go sell these people some advertising in the British Journal of Archaeology. It seems highly unlikely, but people would try. Or an author's complaining letter, write a letter from me, I will sign it, but you get it right, saying sorry, or whatever it might be. Or here's an opportunity to launch a new journal. I was only there for 8 months. It was a quite unpleasant atmosphere. In the big office, big open plan office, and at least once a day, maybe twice, over the tannoy system, which was rather like, you know, the Auschwitz-type tannoy systems that you see in movies, would come, this is your chairman here, attention, attention, and we'd be given some instruction or other. One of them, these instructions, was to go and canvass for him. He was standing to be a member of Parliament, and we were instructed, the whole company, to go to these coaches that would take us to the constituency and canvass on his behalf. I was then head of the union, and so I had to ask him a question directly, which was, Mr. Maxwell, when you say we have to go and canvass, is that compulsory or is it a choice? And he said, it's compulsory. And I said, well, it's fine that people, if they wish to canvass for you, can. It's not fine to make it mandatory. And he said, Richard, I thought you had a good future with this company. The following day, I was shown an advertisement for a job at OUP and thought maybe I should go for it. But just to finish on this Pergamon thing, the global vision he didn't see the world as Britain or Europe, or it was genuinely global. It was Japan, it's Switzerland, it was Peru. It was very scientific, scientist-focused. And interestingly, when he was having a lot of trouble, as he did, his journal editors always supported him because he understood how important it was that journals existed and how important it was that they were disseminated through libraries, essentially. And he built something that was truly wonderful. When it all went wrong, for various reasons you can read about, he was forced to sell, and Elsevier are the beneficiaries of that really fantastic list of journals.
Mm-hmm. That's one reason I started the conference. I wanted to get him to speak at the conference.
Yeah.
And so I went, and I thought I could go in there and talk to him, but forget that.
I think you weren't pushy enough, frankly.
Well,
So Katina, let's go back to how the conference originated, the very first one. What was it that that made you set up a meeting?
There was an antiquarian book fair taking place at the College of Charleston, and I met a lot of publishers that way. Not a lot of people, there were about 30 exhibitors, but I was interested in, a lot of people were interested in doing more, and so I just started talking to people.
Was that an interest from your professional librarian perspective or a personal interest or both?
Both. I was, I tried to be a librarian, and I was, but I also wanted to be an author. So I tried to write books. So I was interested in both aspects of his life, even though he never published fiction, I don't believe.
Had you asked him, he would have done.
You think?
Yeah, he published anything.
Who
that
made up
moves.
the fiction? No, I'm sorry. That's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
But now I can't get to him.
Thank goodness, is all I can say to that. But it's interesting, the development of this conference, because I've been here once before, and I can't remember exactly when, but it's doubled in size or tripled in size. It's been a remarkable evolution. And one of, I think, the pillars of that evolution is that it genuinely promotes discourse between publishers and librarians. There is quite a lot of coverage, I think it's fair to say, about the disagreements. I won't go into them. I'm sure we all know what they are in various aspects. But this is an opportunity to put those to one side and think creatively. Mm-hmm. And I think what Katina's built here is quite remarkable.
It was a lot of fun. It really was. I said if it wasn't fun anymore, I was going to quit doing it.
Yeah, that's very good advice. I'm just picking up on that. In their folly, Reed Elsevier, as was, paid for me to go to the Harvard Business School on their advanced management program to learn something. I'm not at all sure what I learned. I certainly can't remember any of it, except for one thing. And I don't think they meant me to take it seriously, but I did, which is if you don't enjoy doing a job, if you're not having fun, probably a better idea that you don't do it, because you'd be doing it badly. This was music to my ears as I stopped doing spreadsheets and office planning. Wonderful.
Yeah, I hate spreadsheets. I hate bureaucracy, which is one reason, I didn't do it for the college. I did it for myself because I hate bureaucracy. I couldn't say enough about how I hate it.
So you had the first meeting or the first couple of meetings
Yes.
that were focused on trade of antiquarian books and
No,
so
that was only the first one.
the first one. And so what happened? How did it evolve?
A lot
for
of
you?
people were interested. There was not another competing conference except for Sewell Lee's conference in Texas, I believe it was. Anyway, a lot of people were interested in getting together and talking about library issues. And so I decided to change it to be about everything about libraries, acquiring things for libraries. And that's why it became popular, because it was for everybody, not just for antiquarians. The antiquarians are great. They're a very close-knit and great group, but they really didn't fit. They didn't not fit with us, with librarians, that much. They did sort of, but not really.
And when you say for everyone, do you mean publishers and vendors started to come right from the beginning?
Yes, I thought it was very unfortunate that they had separate meetings for the different groups, for publishers, vendors, librarians. I thought that was, they were all talking about the same, but they weren't talking to each other. And I thought that was very stupid. So that's why I decided to do a conference for everybody, for all those groups to talk together.
And how did you develop it over the years? Did it grow in fits and starts, or was it a smooth progression?
I think
Year on year.
no, it just happened. I mean, a lot of people kept telling each other to come. It was word of mouth, I think. I mean, I didn't have any money to do publicity, so it was just, we were just doing what people wanted to do. They wanted to talk about the issues. You know, there was a lot going on that they didn't like or did like, you know, so.
How important do you think it is that the meeting is in this place, not in this place, but in this city? Slightly out of the way, but once you get here, it's very delightful. Was it always part of the draw that people wanted to come
Definitely.
to Charleston?
I don't think anybody would have come if it hadn't been in Charleston.
And you were never tempted to, like other conferences do, to move around?
No,
different
I
locations?
wasn't. You know, it's hard to do it in other places. You got to start the whole infrastructure again, and you know, I just didn't want to fool with it. I was lazy, I guess. You know, I had a structure here, and I didn't want to move somewhere else. I did get asked to do it, obviously, but I didn't do it. I did one in St. Louis a long time ago, and it was called Acquisitions 90, and it was okay. I mean, we got a lot of people, but, you know, and it just wasn't it's not the same. Here, you got all this history. I mean, Charleston's got history, and I got a lot of weird people. There are a lot of characters here.
Well, what's your sense of the meeting, Richard, on your second visit?
Well, both the meeting and the run-up to the meeting and the interactions with everyone and the panels that I've attended so far have been, look, I'm not in the flattery business, okay? But this is the most extraordinary meeting I've been to, and I go to a lot. The quality of the discourse between the people, what you set up between the vendors and the publishers and the librarians is at a very high level. There is little argumentation. There are arguments, but rational arguments. And given the changes that are happening in the industry right now, given the challenges, given the complexity, this meeting is absolutely vital. And if I could take a slight risk, over the 50 years I've been around, the abyss between academic publishing and trade publishing has widened, well, for some good reasons and some less than good reasons. But the quality of the discourse in trade meetings is like nothing compared with this. The discussions are really quite trivial.
It's all about marketing.
If it was about marketing, but actually, you know, it's about, oh, would it be better to have paperbacks than hardbacks? Or,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, come off it. Should we stain the edges of the books to appeal to the new adult market, which I only discovered the other day?
Well, libraries were trying to decide whether to buy hardback or softback.
Yeah. I mean,
We went through all that.
yeah, it's not such a big deal, you know. And indeed, I'm on the board of the Frankfurt Book Fair, and one of the world's leading trade publishers, who I will not name, said that we're very lucky in the book business because sales are booming and the digital revolution has a little or no impact. Well, come off it. If they really believe that. So what I'm trying to say is that this meeting is incredibly important and is of a high quality, with high quality people debating serious issues. And I don't think that happens much elsewhere.
Well, that happened because we just got the people together, and they did it. I didn't do it. The people that came did it. So, I mean, I had a fabulous time doing it. I really did, and meeting all kinds of fabulous people, except for Robert Maxwell.
Maybe we can focus in on one of these key issues, or at least acknowledge one of the key issues in AI and how AI is transforming all types of publishing, all types of research, all types of communication. Looking back on your careers, this is maybe the third convulsion in publishing, the first one being digitization, the introduction
from
of
print,
computers.
yeah.
The second one being the internet and the ability to share information electronically. Here we are at the third one. Having lived and contributed substantially, both of you, to the first two revolutions, what would you say about how we should approach AI? What lessons can you give to the youngsters out here that think that they're facing the biggest hurdles, challenges, opportunities ever faced? Are they really, or is it, how does this compare to the other revolutions, and what should we
I don't
learn?
particularly want to be nasty, but I think that AI is just a fad. I'm sure that people will keep using it. It's a wonderful tool, but that's all it is a tool, in my opinion. I mean, I think that AI is very good for what you need it for, but it's not the be-all, and it's not like turning something to print, from digital to print. It's not the same.
I think that's right, except we have that phrase in English literature, up to a point, Lord Copper, which suggests I don't quite agree with you.
I'm sure you're right. I mean,
No. AI's come and hit us. I mean, it's been coming for a while. It's really in the last 12 months, I guess, that we're really aware of it. From an authorial point of view, there is enormous fear among the author community. Someone's going to steal my work. Someone's going to replace me. Well, you know, who's going to write these books? And
that's always been the case.
yeah, I
though.
know. The authors are, by their nature, fragile.
Right.
But there they are, and there they will remain, I'm sure. But they're frightened. Publishers are frightened, largely, I think, frightened of ghosts rather than reality, so which is where I sort of agree with you. There's major publishers have issued edicts saying that that they may not use AI if it risks putting out of work any creative person. Well, you know, that's rather like issuing an edict in 1920 that you're not allowed to use a car in case it puts out of work the saddler. But that is part of the rules of a very major publisher right now.
I think that's stupid, though.
It's completely stupid. Yeah. Wonderful thing about you, Katina, is you say it as it is, and that is bloody stupid. In fact, I wrote to the company question saying that, and I didn't get a reply. So that's a second area. But here's the thing that actually I think is of concern, but not of desperate concern. It is the threat to copyright.
And that's a huge issue.
And that's because without that, we don't have an industry. Mm-hmm. So that is genuinely existential. We can do what, if I might say, US corporations like doing, which is issue injunctions, sue people, hire thousands of lawyers, all of whom will disagree with each other. Build
of course.
up.
They've got to make the money.
Yeah, they make the money, for sure. Or we can address it in a constructive way and build ways of the LLMs, the large language models, to pay us and respect copyright, by building something that is workable. And we actually have workable systems in Copyright Clearance Center and similar.
The next thing I'd like to do is I'd like to have a conversation between not the people that represent it, but the issues. I'd like to have a conversation between copyright, full text. Just if you personify issues like that rather than the people, I think that would be a good thing to do next.
Absolutely. And you know, listen and move forward. I mean, the industry has been successful. I mean, you say there have been 2 revolutions. Actually, there have been more. There was radio, there was TV, both of which were going to throw us out of business, movies, the speakers, and I could go on. And our industry has managed to evolve, to adapt, and remain healthily constructive. And I think the same, so to answer your question about the younger people here, you know, just engage with it and don't let fear make you go rigid.
Okay, so Leah gave me one task and I've failed. That was to keep us on time. And I want to offer the opportunity to people in the hall to, if you'd like to say something to Katina and Richard or ask a question, then please do. Could you go up to the mic and then we'll be able to record you? Yeah, thanks.
And incidentally, my copy comes from courtesy of Anthony Watkinson, because I forgot to bring one with me, and he's just finished reading it. So thank you, Anthony.
Mine comes from Charles, the son, Charles Watkinson.
So the solution to our future problems is Watkinson.
I'm right on cue.
Right on cue. I'm Charles Watkinson. That's embarrassing. So, Katina, this is for you and for Richard. So, I have had the privilege of doing the Charleston in proof. I know it's only out in the spring, and you're doing an open access version, not like Richard, but you're doing an open access version. But okay, so here's the question. I've read a section of your takeaways for the future, and I want to perhaps ask a slightly controversial question. You write, "We must rethink our aversion to commerce and commercial companies. Great numbers of librarians bristle at the name Elsevier, a noble company that has served the knowledge industry since 1880. Where does this aversion come from? Is it a matter of the definition of the word profit? Profit just means coming out ahead." So I wanted to ask you, in the context of increasing consolidation in the academic publishing industry with the IPO of Springer, for example, recently, and private equity firms diving in for the sake of money rather than our industry, is there such a thing as too much profit? Is there ever a moment where commerce actually is destroying publishing rather than supporting publishing?
I don't think there's too much profit ever. I mean, I think that publishers have done so much for the industry that we need to acknowledge that. I mean, just because we don't like what some of them do, I mean, the things that Elsevier has bought important companies and done important things for the library industry. So, I mean, I just think you can't say one is bad and the other's good. You know, I think that's a big mistake.
Absolutely. And, you know, what is too much profit? Compared with the arms industry or the pharmaceutical industry, we are very low profit
or
businesses.
Or the U.S. budget.
Or the U.S. president, for that matter. So I think the important thing is not what the profit is, but what is done with that profit. And for all these businesses, the first thing that has to be done is to pay tax. The second is to pay dividends to investors. And I don't know about all the companies, but I can certainly speak for Relics. Most of their investors are pension funds, and that money is feeding the pension funds. The third thing is reinvestment. When I was working at Macmillan, and we had the great honor, privilege to publish Nature and its various things. We were pumping, I can't tell you the numbers because I don't remember them, but we were putting a huge proportion of the profit back into building a better business. And I think that's what people have done over the years. Simple thing, the idea that you can see a reference in a paper and click on that reference and it takes you to the original paper seamlessly. It's so obvious to us now, but beforehand, the very idea of doing it, and that came about because publishers invested, not governments, and frankly, not universities. It was publishers who made that investment and also built the platforms on which we sell. Science Direct was one of the pioneers. Fair?
Yeah.
So we could go on, and
Yes, we could.
I'm sure there's some interesting views in the audience, but I think maybe we can have one final question. Yes, sir.
John Lavender, now working for Ingenta, but I've done many other things, including working for Charleston Conference at some times. But interestingly, I took over from the person who took over from Richard Charkin at Pergamon. And very interestingly, I got the job because I was in the marketing department and Steve Thornton, who took over from Richard, left. I sent a memo to Maxwell saying, any chance I could have the job? And that was on a Friday. On the Monday morning, Steve called me and said, well, where are you? Maxwell called me at home to say, you're starting on Monday. And there I was. But the interesting thing about Maxwell, and a lot of people forget, is even then, in a primitive time when we joined Pergamon, he said, we've got to learn how to work computers because the future is going to be electronic. And I remember we all got sent on a course to ICL, who were the Great British Hope in computing. And of course, like all Great British Hopes, failed dismally. But we went on their course, and other than remembering, we all discovered a bottle of 50-year-old brandy, which was wonderfully expensive and we enjoyed charging, showed us a future. And I remember he bought another company, and at the time, those of you who remember DEC VAX computers, he had the biggest installation of these computers, which was like a room this size, air-conditioned, because if the temperature went over 70 degrees or something, they would all blow up. And he was a terrible man in many ways. And I could regale you with some interesting stories. But the important thing is he did foresee the business of publishing. He did foresee the fact that the journal editors who loved him, and really he looked after them more than he looked after the staff in many ways. But it was a great thing. And I just thought someone who wasn't a Watkinson should get up and talk about these questions. So there we are. Oh,
thanks so much.
Charleston, I'm going to say Katina had built a beautiful thing in Charleston. When I first came here, I really enjoyed it because the discourse is so high level. It's not just, yes, there were complaints, but otherwise it was great. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Well, and I'd like you to join me in thanking these two wonderful pillars of our community and great representatives of publishing and librarianship. Katina and Richard, thank you so much.
We have an exciting announcement from the Charleston Hub and annual reviews. There it is. We have an exciting new online publication. You may have seen the video that took place just prior to this session, or maybe the announcement at the vendor showcase yesterday. It is named in honor of Katina. It is written by and for the global library community. We wanted to create something that was going to honor her legacy, her contributions to the scholarly communications industry, her legacy of community building. Katina will focus on key topics in 3 main content areas, headed up by 3 senior editors. And I'm going to invite each of them to come in turn to the podium to tell a little bit about their sections. So we'll start first with Curtis Brundy, Associate University Librarian for Scholarly Communications and Collections at Iowa State University, who is heading up our Open Knowledge section. Curtis, can you tell us a little bit about your section and what impact you hope Katina has on advancing the conversation around open science and knowledge sharing in the library community?
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. And I'd like to quickly just say thanks to Richard and Katina and to Leah for the opportunity to be an editor on this new magazine. It's extremely exciting. So my section of the magazine is called Open Knowledge, and Open Knowledge is going to be covering a lot of the topics that are going to be talked about over the coming days here at this conference. So open access, open data, open infrastructure, the open education movement. We have a whole suite of openness that's on the march, and that's what the Open Knowledge section is going to be covering. If you browse the issue, or not the issue, it's a continuous publishing magazine, but if you look at the articles we have up there now, the other thing that would probably jump out to you is that we're bringing forward global voices. So up there now, there's articles from Indonesia, articles from Africa, articles from Europe, articles from the Americas, and that's because scholarly communication and the open movement, these are global phenomena, and that's the level that we need to be working. And I think the magazine and its impact and the section's impact is really going to be a function of the editors. We have a phenomenal group of editors in this section that are coming from all over the world. And it's going to be a function of our engagement with the community and working with all of you to tell the stories about this open transition that we need to tell. And we had a dinner last night with editors, and I was talking with one of the editors on my section. And you know, to me, what inspired me, you know, the reason I come to this conference, and it's interesting to me, is because now we're talking about openness more than we ever have. And the magazine is the same thing. When I talked to Richard about this, to be able to lead a section that's chronicling this journey, best practices, where we're winning, where we need to work together to tackle challenges, it's really, really interesting, and it's very timely. But at the dinner last night, we're talking about all of these exciting open things that are going on. But there's also things that are challenging right now that are heading in the other direction. And that's book banning, that's things that are heading in a closed direction. And this section is going to evolve over time to tell the stories that the community needs to hear so we can work together to address, you know, the advancing knowledge and things that we need to address climate, to address public health, to address all of these emerging crises around the world. And I won't go too dark here, but I couldn't be more thrilled to be working with the editors on this section, to be working with Richard and the team at Annual Reviews. So yeah, it's a very exciting time. So thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. Next, we have Jill Emery, who is Collection Development and Management Librarian at Portland State University, leading the Resource Reviews section. Jill, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about your section and how it builds on the previous work of the Charleston Advisor.
Thank you, and thank you again to Annual Reviews and Katina and Leah for this privilege and opportunity. It's one that I really take to heart, and I'm really grateful that I'm the one who gets to build on the work of Becky Lenzini and George Makovic, who created the Charleston Advisor and really built a strong foundation for 25 years of resource reviews for the community at large, for librarians to be able to have an opportunity to both write reviews and look at products and tools and resources that we use in our libraries and write comprehensive reviews of those. And we're really building on that and trying to expand that into kind of new areas and new realms. And we've got a really great team of editors that are working on this. When you go to the website for Katina, you will see at the bottom of the page the ability to recommend people to be a reviewer or to recommend yourself to be a reviewer, and I highly encourage you to do that, as well as to recommend products and resources for us to look at. And we really welcome the community input into this so we can make sure we're bringing you the content that you really want and you really need. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill. And finally, we have Tony Zanders, founder and CEO of SkillType, who is leading the Future of Work section. Tony, can you come and tell us about your content section and how Katina can support library leaders in navigating the changes and new technologies heading our way?
Of course, thank you and good morning. One of the questions that I asked myself when I was approached to lead this section was, do we really need another journal? Do we really need another magazine? There's so many blogs, there's so many outlets emailing us, and the answer in a very short introspection was yes. In fact, I couldn't have planned this any better. I had no idea what our conversation would be about when we saw Richard and Katina speak this morning. But this was the perfect example of why we actually do need another journal or another magazine, because the conversation that took place today, if we're honest, probably could not have happened online. It probably could not have happened on social media. Several disagreements that took place were discussed in a very cordial way, in a respectful way, and I think that the panelists today probably have more respect for each other than they did even before, because they know more about one another through that conversation. The future of work is probably the stickiest, most touchy, most controversial area of what we do, because this impacts each of us, our personal livelihoods. It gets to issues of our identity and things that are very vulnerable to speak about. And that really creates a powder keg, especially in an online environment. And so the answer is yes, we actually do have room for a space that can take the spirit of this conference, where the participants who have been coming for years have been able to engage from different parts of the aisle on issues that impact each of us personally. So that's my pitch for it. I think that we're in this really exciting time in librarianship where none of us actually know what the future holds. I think that's one thing we can agree on. The second thing we can agree on is that no one's coming to save libraries. I think that the conversations should happen amongst us first. Because if someone else comes in and says, well, let's talk about libraries from our perspective as the CFO or our perspective as the Office of Research, it probably won't lead to the outcome that we would if we had those tough conversations ourselves. And so I'm excited to be supported by a group of editors from around the world, also people who have rich experience that probably can't be utilized in their places of work. Because when you're in your employer, in your institution, there's a level of sensitivity you have to talk about certain things. And so this is a sort of safe space that is external to their institutions, and we hope to hear from each of you in an environment where you can share experiences you've gained that can help both the current generation of library workers, but also the ones that are looking to see what's next. And so please reach out to us if you'd like to contribute. We hope you enjoy some of the articles that we've already begun with, and there is much more to come. Thank you.
Thank you. As all of our senior editors have said, we want this to be interactive and community-led. We want conversations around the topics and resources that are there. So we hope you'll join us. katinamagazine.org, there's a QR code there that you can sign up for updates and learn more. And as well, we have a graphic recording artist that's in the lobby here at the Gaillard Center, the giant bulletin board that you saw probably as you walked in for breakfast, asking the question, what does librarianship elevated mean to you? So we hope you'll stop by and tell us what you think and join us online as well. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day at the conference.